I went from bankrupt to the number one salesperson for this Fortune 500 company for 8 months in a row. And that's when I realized, well, there's got to be something to this copywriting thing.
Hey, podcast listener, you're about to discover insider tips, tricks, and secrets to making more sales and converting more prospects into customers with email marketing. For more information about the Email Marketing Podcast or the Autoresponder Guide, go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Hey, it's Johnny McIntyre here, the Autoresponder Guy, and it's time for episode 36 of the McMethod Email Marketing Podcast, where you'll discover how to increase your email profits by 25 to 100% in 90 days or less without spending more money on advertising. Today, I'll be talking to Michel Fortin, a direct response copywriter who's famous for being the guy behind the Traffic Secrets launch. Now, that was the first launch in internet history that generated over $1 million, and it did it in just 18 hours. So Michel Fortin, my guest today, he wrote the sales letter for that launch. So when it comes to what makes people buy online, this guy knows how to do it properly. He's a pro. Today, you'll discover not one, but two formulas that Michel uses when he writes a sales letter, when he writes Blockbuster copy, and you're going to be able to go away and you're going to be able to apply this instantly to get better results with your own copy. Michel's been doing this for 20 years and he's got a ton of experience. So this is going to be a fantastic episode. To get the show notes for this episode of the Email Marketing Podcast, go to themcmethod.com/36. Now I've got two 5-star reviews on the iTunes store today. The first one is from Nolan J. Fisher from Australia. 5 stars. This is Email Marketing Gold. This podcast and email marketing autoresponder info presented by John is awesome. I've implemented just a few of John's tips and strategies from this podcast, and I've had instant returns. If you are looking to dramatically improve your email marketing and autoresponder series, then you've definitely found the guru in John McIntyre. Thank you for the kind words, Nolan. Listener, if you've just heard that review, that's just a kick in the butt to take some of the ideas that you're going to learn today and that you can learn in the other episodes and apply them to your business, and like Nolan, get instant returns. The other review is from Boston Buyer from the United States. He says, deep dive on email and copy. The guests are great choices. The questions are on point. Bob Bly's interview alone is worth listening to every episode. Keep it up. Brett from Bootstrapped with Kids. Thank you, Brett. Thank you for the review. I love the reviews. If you're enjoying the podcast and if you're getting something out of it, and if you're taking the tips and applying them like you absolutely should be, and you're getting results, please go across to the iTunes store, search for the Email Marketing Podcast or McMethod or John McIntyre. Leave me a review and I will read it out on the show and do my best to give you a bit of fame. Now, before we get into the interview with Michel, I've got one listener question, which is a great one. How do you turn your survey results into cash? Well, let me show you. Suppose you had a survey and someone said, I wanted to lose 10 pounds by Christmas. Then your headline becomes, lose 10 pounds by Christmas with this free report with my 90-day program. And the opening becomes, if you want to lose 10 pounds by Christmas, this may be the most important letter you've ever read. And the call to action, on the sales letter in the email becomes, if you want to lose 10 pounds by Christmas, click the link below and get started today. Now, that example, it's not a perfect example, but I did it to illustrate a point that you take survey responses and you're looking for phrases and words that people use to describe their problems. So you want to understand, how are they thinking about their own problem? Do they call it belly fat? Do they call it flab? Do they call it being obese? Because you want to use the same words. So then when you write emails and sales copy and headlines and all this stuff, it's going to sound like you're talking directly to them because you are literally speaking their language. So great copywriting is not about having all the tricks and all sorts of stuff like that. It's not about being the absolute best at writing copy. It's about being the best at understanding your prospects and how they're describing their problems. So you take your survey results and you find a way to use the exact survey results in your copy. That's pretty much it. If you got responses in your survey about problems that your market has, then it's like create a product for each problem and then start sending people to those pages. So you're using the survey to get the key phrases that people use to describe their problems, and also just to find out what problems they have so you can create content and products and videos and all sorts of stuff that's going to help them overcome those problems. Plus, you'll also find out what your objections are if you ask about it. Maybe you need more proof. Maybe people don't believe that you can deliver on what you're offering. Maybe they think it's too fast. Maybe they think they can't get the results in that time. There's all sorts of reasons. You can find all this out with survey. But the main thing is this idea that you take their words out of their mouth, out of their brain, and you put them on your sales letter and in your emails. That's how you ultimately, in my opinion, turn survey results into cash. Okay, that's it for now. Let's get into the interview, the podcast with Michel Fortin. It's John McIntyre here, the autoresponder guy. I'm here with Michel Fortin, a direct response copywriter and marketing consultant who's been doing this online marketing thing and the offline stuff as well for 20 years. He's been on the internet since 1992. He's seen a lot of stuff, especially around email marketing, copywriting, direct response stuff, all things to do with selling more and engaging with people. So this is going to be really interesting. Today we're going to talk about two formulas that Michel uses to basically sell more. There's one of them is the Quest formula and one of them is the Oath formula. It's going to be pretty cool. I'm excited about this one. So we'll get into that in just a minute. Michel, how are you going today?
I'm doing well. How are you, John?
I'm fantastic. Now, before we talk about these formulas, give us a quick background on how you got into marketing, or just tell us a bit about who is Michel Fortin and what do you do?
Sure. Here's the very short version of it. Basically, I went into sales because I had this tremendous fear of rejection. It's one of the things that I had growing up. And I thought, well, what better way is there to fight the fear of rejection than going into sales? So I decided to go into sales and I realized that I was getting rejected all the time and I wasn't doing much in commission. I actually had to go broke. I declared bankruptcy at a very young age. One day I decided, maybe I should just write letters to people and they will call me. Rather than having the door slam in my face, I can just write letters. They'll call me to set up an interview or set up a presentation. That way I know that they're already interested in the product that I'm going to sell. At that time, it was insurance. I just stumbled on this thing called copywriting. I wrote lead generation sales letters. I started to have presentations booked and I became the number one. I went from bankrupt to the number one salesperson for this Fortune 500 company for 8 months in a row. And that's when I realized, well, there's got to be something to this copywriting thing. So I decided to go more into copywriting in sales, became a marketing consultant. I really never labeled myself as a copywriter. I labeled myself as a marketing consultant, quote unquote, but I did copy and I was primarily my thrust. Over time, I worked for a company that then was looking at this internet thing. It was brand new. Those days, it wasn't really big. 92, 93, they were mostly what they call shopping malls or online malls. And I was just creating copy I thought it was just an electronic version of the Yellow Pages. So I thought people are looking you up. And if they look you up online, there you are. And I wanted to make sure there was a free offer and there was a good copy. But what happened is over time, more and more companies, more and more clients were hiring me to write copy. And then one day, a gentleman by the name of John Reese in 2004, it's almost 10 years now, my gosh, asked me to write a sales letter for a product called Traffic Secrets. And we made $1 million in one day, but he calls it the famous $1 million day. Now, I don't really consider myself as a fantastic copywriter, a great copywriter. I think I'm an okay or a good copywriter, but I'm more well known for that event simply because it's sort of like the Roger Bannister of online copy, I guess you can say, because I broke the 4-minute mile, so to speak. I became the first person to write copy that sold $1 million in one day. And it's been broken and many, many, many times by a lot of top copywriters out there. But that's what made me more or less famous. This is where I am today. I guess I write copy for a lot of online marketers, online businesses in various niches now, from the weight loss to stock market to golfing. This is what I am.
Okay, nice. So let's get straight into these formulas then. Give us a bit of a background on what are these two formulas and why you think they're important.
It's interesting that you asked me that because what happened was in the course of my career, I wanted to sort of add to my resume the fact that I actually taught marketing at a local college and they hired me to actually teach marketing and e-commerce. There was nothing like copywriting, although there was a course that I taught called professional selling. And I was trying to teach to my students the concept of writing copy. And it was really hard for me to actually make them understand various steps in the process. And I thought, okay, well, we have at least some formulas that have been around for the longest time. The AIDA formula, attention, interest, desire, and action. That's pretty much more so well known. Yeah, it's a classic. But try to apply that to a sales letter. Now, I know that AIDA can be applied to a display ad, can be applied to a commercial, but there was not enough for me to teach that to a student body on how to apply that to a sales letter. Whether it's a video sales letter or an email autoresponder sales letter, I'm going to come up with a formula so that they can remember it by. And I'm a big fan of mnemonics, like a guidepost on where you put specific copy points and the way that the sales letter flows. So I come up with this formula called Quest. And I love it because it's like, think of it as you're going on a quest or climbing a mountain, so to speak. Quest stands for qualify, understand, educate, stimulate, and transition. So qualify is basically when they hit your sales letter, they should know, they should understand instantly that this is for them. That's what means by qualified. They really should understand that they are in the audience that is specifically targeted for this sales letter. And you have to do that as efficiently as possible, even if it's just to create a curiosity. That's actually the whole point, is that if they're curious enough to open the email or curious enough to go to visit this website or read the sales letter by reading a headline, they know that they're qualified somehow, some way. U is understand, which is basically to use empathy, talk about the problem, make sure that you know that they know, you understand their situation, that you apply a lot of empathy. And empathy is actually one of the key components of great copy.
I tell that to people all the time.
It's probably one of the most important things. In fact, when I do a lot of my own research before I land into new industries, I try to either buy the product or interview a lot of clients. Sometimes my best copy is actually given to me by actual clients. This is a little bit of a tangent, but a trick that I teach a lot of copywriters is call and interview successful clients or clients that have bought the product and prod them to the point where they're actually selling you on the product. You know, the emotions come out, the description of their previous problem, and now that has been solved with the benefits of the product. And then you get the interviews transcribed, you practically got your copy written for you. So that's just a bit of a tip, but that's what I do. And I want to have enough empathy that people can get that the moment they read the copy. Educate is that once you've created that empathy, once you've created that connection with the audience, they understand the problem, they understand that you understand their problem. Now it's to educate them on the solution, the potential solutions, and as much as your own solution and why your solution is better than anybody else's, which actually leads to the next point, stimulate. That's the value buildup. We're getting close to the end. We're ramping them up to get them to understand why they should buy the product and why they should buy the product now. And then finally, transition is just a different way of saying transitioning them from a browser to a buyer, from a prospect to a client. Just very simply, the closing process. That is called the Quest formula, Quest. And it's like climbing a mountain, like up to the E, the educate, is like climbing up the mountain. It's a bit of an uphill struggle because that's where the most important part of the copy is. It's not really at the end. It's at the beginning, getting them interested, getting them immersed in the copy, and getting them first to get on that slippery slide, as Gary Halbert calls it. You know, once you get to that point, then after that, it's really downhill. Then you get them excited. Then you stimulate them by saying, okay, this is why you need this product and you need it now. You need to solve your problem now.
So you can give this to people like students, people you work with, the advantage of having something like this. So you have the ADA, and this is somewhat similar, but it kind of helps having different frameworks because each framework becomes a new way of looking at the world. A friend of mine, he rants on and on about this, but the more frameworks you have, you pick up a framework or a few of them every time you read a book. The advantage of it is the person, I think, and this is fairly true, the person with the most frameworks or the most lenses or the most ways to see a given problem is the person with the biggest advantage because they know the highest amount of points at which they could solve it.
Exactly. And it's also a great way to sort of use it as a test. When I had students who had an assignment, which was to write a sales letter or to write a lead generation letter or to write a business letter, or whatever the case was at that time, I would say, well, then apply the Quest formula to that. I mean, I used the Quest formula prior as guideposts to help me write it's like a skeleton, so to speak. And then I add meat to the skeleton. But when they wrote the sales letter, then I would apply the Quest formula and say, okay, where did you qualify the audience or the reader? Did you qualify them enough? Next is, did you use enough empathy? Did they really understand? And sometimes we also have somebody who is a member of the audience. It's like a sort of a split test, I guess. You do that online a lot with split testing, but you also, if you had a client that you can actually mail a letter to or have them visit a website or read an email, you can find out, do they really understand that you understand their problem? Is there enough empathy there? Then after that is, do you educate them enough on the product? Sometimes a lot of people will then focus so much on the close. I see that problem so many times that they forget to understand that you need to at least educate them on, first of all, why the product exists and why it's important and why it's important to them and why it's important to them at that point in time. And then after that is, of course, stimulate and transition, which, by the way, and I hope you don't mind, I'm going to segue this into my other formula because understanding your audience and then educating them enough on the product really depends on the level of awareness they're at. And that's why I use another formula called OATH. And OATH simply stands for oblivious, apathetic, thinking, and hurting. Look at it this way. How prepared is your audience to take an oath, so to speak? And basically it means this. It means, are they oblivious, meaning they don't even know about the problem? That means you have to educate them on the problem, why the problem is, why it exists, and that they're actually suffering from it and how bad it is. And then apathetic is, well, they know the problem. They know they have a problem, but they really don't care about solving it. So you need to make it a bit more urgent. You need to make it bigger. You need to blow it up. I think Dan Kennedy calls it problem, agitate, solve. That's the agitate part, right?
Yep.
Then you got thinking, which is, okay, they know the problem. They know there's a solution for it. And maybe they know your solution, but they're thinking about it. They're not really, it's not urgent enough for them. And that's where you need to bring the level of urgency, add a sense of urgency, whether it's from a promotional process to even why is it so important to solve the problem now? And then, of course, the last one is hurting, H. And that's probably the audience people would love most. Everybody would love to have a market that would be hurting because that's a market that's desperate. They will buy from you even if you just put a buy now button on your webpage. That's to determine not only what level of awareness your audience is at, but how long your copy should be. I mean, a lot of people say, Michael, long copy or short copy? And I say, well, what level of awareness is your market at? Because the more oblivious they are, then the more education you need to do. And therefore, the more copy you will need to educate them on A, the problem, B, the solution, and C, why the solution needs to be solved now. That's the other formula that sort of works in tangent with the quest formula, the educate part, which is how much education do you really need? That depends on where they're at in terms of awareness.
And the interesting thing is that this affects everything. Like if you get the market sophistication level off, if you miscalculate, the headline's going to be off, which means people aren't qualified properly, which then is going to mean the empathy is off, which then means you can't educate them properly, you can't stimulate them, and therefore you don't have anyone to transition from a prospect into a customer.
Yep, absolutely. And I think this is the one thing that a lot of people make mistakes with. And this is the same thing with subject lines in email as much as the headline of a sales letter and the very first few slides on a video sales letter. And when we talk about the AIDA formula, we talk about attention, grabbing their attention. That's okay, grabbing their attention. But they also need to get immersed into the copy. And the headline, as much as the subject line, it has only one job, which is to get people into the copy, or in this case, into the email. It doesn't mean you have to sell them right there. It doesn't mean you have to be clever. And I think that's where I see a lot of emails, fall in my trash bin because it doesn't excite me enough. It doesn't at least get me curious enough to open my email to say, well, what the heck is this? Or what is this all about? For example, when I write email copy, I love cliffhangers. I'm a big fan of writing storylines and storytelling in my emails where I sort of leave people on a cliff, whether it's to get them to open up the second email in the series or to get them to click on the link to go and find out more about this online somewhere as a sales letter if I'm actually continuing the sale on a website. That's so important. What you just said, John, is if people don't get to the very beginning, if they're not qualified enough, they don't really understand that this is really for them. Because you get all of the people who might not necessarily be qualified, but they might be curious. Well, that's fine. There'll be people who will read the first few paragraphs and then they'll drop. They'll never buy your product. I think it was Dan Kennedy who once said that readership drops dramatically after the first few paragraphs. But then it doesn't drop until almost the very end. And that's what you want. You want people who drop off at the beginning is because they know that it's not for them. They're not qualified. At least you did a good job to qualify them enough so that they can leave. They're not going to be your clients anyways. But those who stick and they stick around, then you keep them there until they buy your product and you get them to buy your product.
So speaking of this formula then, how do you, someone's sitting down about to write sales copy or an email, how are they going to figure out what level of market sophistication their prospects are at?
Well, that's an interesting question because when I write copy, I spend very little time writing the copy.
I love this question. How much time do you spend writing copy versus
10 to 20%.
10 to 20%.
Yeah.
And what do you do for the rest?
Yeah. Research. That's probably the most, and I kind of giggle because because it's the one thing that a lot of people fail to understand. People think that writing is just writing. You're not being hired. I'm speaking for myself as a copywriter. If you're a business owner, the job is not to write copy for the sake of just making a sales letter. Your job is to have all these components to connect with your audience, that there's some kind of connection there. They fully understand that there is something in there for them. And the way to do that is to spend a lot of time researching a market. I have, for example, on my copywriting services website, I own a copywriting agency called The Success Doctor, and we have a questionnaire that has over 25 questions. We dig deep. We ask questions like, for example, what are the 6 most common misconceptions about your product? Or what are the 6 ways that clients tend to confuse you with your competitors? What are the 6 biggest features of your product and their related benefits? What are the 6 most common questions people ask about your product and the answers that you offer? Give me also maybe your 6 best customers. And I talked about this at the beginning of the call is I love interviewing clients. I love calling them up, recording the call with their permission, of course, and getting that call transcribed because they literally can sell the product for me. It's a really cool way to sort of dig deeper and get them all excited, get them to sell you on the product that you're actually writing copy for. before. And now you have this empathy built up, your ability to write copy that will connect with your audience. So to answer your question, 80% of my time is spent researching the product, going into a lot of their copy, their existing copy, their previous copy, looking at their conversion rates, looking at their audience, especially their audience, trying to dig deeper in who is their audience specifically. Sometimes I will build a persona, a buyer persona. I think Paul Myers, another very well-known copywriter, he calls it the perfect prospect profile, which is basically understanding that when you're writing your copy, it's as if you're writing for that one person only. Yes, a lot of people around that or in that market will be reading copy, but when you're writing copy, it's like a one-on-one situation. But don't just think of it of writing in the first person. Think of it also as you know exactly who you're talking to. What's their interest? What keeps them up at night? What's their hobbies and interests? What kind of groups or associations do they belong to? What kind of work do they do? What kind of family life do they have? What kind of business life do they have? What kind of friends do they go to? What kind of watering hole do they frequent? And all those things are so important because then when you fully grasp who your audience truly is, then you can become, and this is probably the best key to writing good copy, is their best friend. Another very well-known copywriter, Brian Keith Voiles, who said that when you write copy and people land on your copy, they have to sort of take you as if you are a blessing in their life at that point. You are a blessing. You're there to provide a service or a product that's going to truly transform, change their lives, or be a solution to a problem that they're suffering from. So you need to look at as being a blessing. And in order to do that, you really, truly need to understand your audience.
I love how you put that there, how the copywriting, it's not really about writing. I mean, sure, you got to sit down and write something, but the real task of being a copywriter or being a marketer is to know how to research and really drill down into why someone would want what you have to offer.
Yeah, exactly. One time I had a client who I sort of poked them on purpose. I had a hard time writing a copy. They've given me a lot of information. They know their product. They know their audience best. I didn't get enough information. So I sort of played a little, I guess you could say stupid. I said, you know what? I can't really sell your product. What else can we say, or what can you tell me about your product? Or I sort of played the devil's advocate, so to speak. And then they came back with this, I can't believe you're saying that because this product will do this and that and the other. And my audience will love this because of this. This is why it's so valuable because people in my competitors will charge that. And I said, great. That's exactly what I wanted. And that's what really copywriting is. It's truly about having a connection with your audience and then making that connection in writing. That's it. Once you connect with your audience, if people truly understand why you exist and why you exist in their lives at this point, they also understand not only the product that you offer, the benefits of your offer, but why they have a problem that needs to be solved only by your product at that point in time. That requires that relationship, that connection. Sometimes you can't do that necessarily, for example, in an email. You can do it for a series of emails. Some people have email marketing campaigns that are various emails at a point in time where they actually take the people through the quest formula in various emails, or you can do that in one single email. But the point is, it's all about the connection. It's not about the writing.
Yeah, it's not about the writing at all. Well, we're right on time right now, but one thing I wanted to touch on before we go is this, jumping back to kind of almost the beginning, the quest formula. This issue of qualifying, can you give me a few examples? When you say qualify and how you do it obviously you're talking about the start of a sales letter. How do you qualify someone? How do you write sales letters that qualify the people you want from the people you don't?
Well, the qualification process can be done at various elements of the copy. Primarily should be done at the beginning, of course, when people read. If not, if they're curious enough, you need to at least qualify them early on enough so that you don't waste their time and they read the whole sales letter and never really buy. Of course, if they leave early, that means you're never meant to buy in the first place, which is sort of what you want. But here's what I mean, though. When you read it in a headline, you can create curiosity, but you can also do it in a pre-headline. You can do it in a sub-headline. You can do it in the deck copy. You can do it in the lead copy. The lead copy is usually the very beginning or the initial point that you talk about in the first few paragraphs of your copy. But here's just an example, and this is a very simplistic example. In my very early career as a copywriter, I specialized primarily in hair transplant doctors. It's because one of my first clients was a hair transplant surgeon. His ads at that time was very bland, dumb, boring headlines. And he still got some good conversions out of his headlines, but still it could be a lot better. And his headlines were something like this: do you have hair loss? And that's fine. And I said to him, I said, The problem with this, and we're talking about qualifying here, the Q, I said, a lot of people might have hair loss. They might read your ad. And if they read your ad because they have hair loss, but they're not really interested in doing something about it, they're going to read your ad for no reason. They're never going to buy it. They're never going to call you and set up an appointment with you for a consultation. If you really want people to set up a consultation, you need to not only qualify, in this case, the demographics, meaning mostly men who have hair loss, especially men who are either single or men who have been recently divorced, or those things that we find out more about our audience that we talked about in Oath. The second is you want to hit the psychographics. People who, or men in this case, who want to do something about their hair loss. They're looking at improving their image, whatever the case is. So all we did is we tweaked the headline. We did this in a test, and this is one of the very few first ads that I've done with this one client that made some dramatic results. All we did is we added suffering instead of do you. So rather than saying, do you have hair loss? We changed it to suffering from hair loss, ? So not only are we targeting men who have hair loss, but we're also targeting men who want to do something about their hair loss. And that dramatically increased sales for this one client. And that's how important qualify is. Do you absolutely need to do that in the headline? No. It has to be done early enough. You have to be efficient with the way you use that qualification process. However, you can do it in the pre-headline, the headline, mostly in the headline, and headlines are really good at doing that. Sometimes you will have a headline that will only speak to a very specific audience in the headline, or only people in that particular audience will understand what the headline means. Everybody else probably wouldn't really understand it, or at least wouldn't grasp the emotional element of it. So you can do that with headline, or you can do it with the deck copy or the first few paragraphs of your copy.
Okay, I love that. Fantastic. Well, we're right on time. But before we get on the call, you talked about Fortinized, and that's where these formulas came from. Tell us more about that, and tell us where people can go to find more about you.
Well, just to correct you, it's not really that they come from. It's sort of a site that I put together because people were asking me to teach them about all my formulas. And of course, I talk about these formulas on my blog at michelfortin.com, but that's not really what's important. A lot of people say, well, how do I apply it to my industry? Or give me more examples, or what exactly do you mean? I mean, some things that you can't really explain in either a 20-minute podcast or in an article on a blog. So what I did is I created a course that would actually go through all of my formulas and go into greater detail and actually some application examples of those formulas. And I created this website and I added the name Fortnite because a lot of people, when they hire me to write copy, they'll either hire me to write copy from scratch or to fix existing copy in order to boost their conversion rates. And very often, this is sort of a term that my clients usually use. They'll say, can you Fortinize this copy for me? So I kind of laugh at that, but I thought, hey, that's a great title for, applying my formulas. So I created a course. It's a video-based course called Fortinize.com. And if people on this podcast would love to know more, I have a little something special for them. It's Fortinize.com/DDC. Drop dead copy. Is that correct, John?
That's correct.
All right. So that's where the course is. It essentially is a video-based course, an online course. And I go into greater details. I talk about my forceps formula, which is how to add elements of proof in a copy. I talk about my FAB formula, which is about features, advantages, and benefits, and how to pull out or how to extract true ultimate end result benefits from your copy and how to add that to your sales letter or your email marketing. So anyways, that's just a few examples, but I do offer a lot more.
Wonderful. I'll have links to all that in the show notes for the podcast at dropdeadcopy.com. Thanks again for doing the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you want to discover more insider tips, tricks, and secrets about driving sales with email marketing, sign up for daily email tips from the autoresponder guide. Go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Sign up, confirm your email address, and I'll send you daily emails on how to improve your email marketing and make more sales via email. You'll find out why open rates don't matter and the 7-letter word that underlies all effective marketing and much more. The editing and production of this podcast were provided by Authority Engine. Learn more at authorityengine.com.